Clash of the Classics.
Hey everyone, I'm your guide here. I'm Donnie. I'm your guide for Horsepower for an Hour. Tom Spence is our partner in crime. He is our historian for these battles. Mr. Ken Hale is our classic car specialist. And Mr. Glenn Eldridge, who has the day off today, is our newest panel member. He's a commentator. He's an automotive columnist for the Auto Addicts magazine. Today, we have instead in studio with us Mr. Fireball Tim Lawrence. Once again, Fireball, welcome to Horsepower for an Hour. Thanks for spending some of the day with us. Always blessed to have you in studio.
Thank you, guys. Enjoying myself.
Well, if you're new to the show, maybe you've just discovered us, you're going to find every week we roll the clock back. We pit two classic models against one another. We take a look at a few things. We look at styling. We look at powertrain, design features. Then we vote on the car that we like best. And as always, we welcome you to join us. Let us know which car you prefer. These battles are fueled continually by the National Parts Depot. You can check them out anytime at npdlink.com. Today's going to be some fun. It's the 1968 Mercedes 280 SL battling that 1968 Porsche Targa. Now, I want to start with the Mercedes, Ken. This body style, definitely one of my favorites. I think they call it the W113. Had a pretty good run from, it seems like, the early 60s through the early 70s. Did some research before we came on today. 2.8 liter overhead cam, inline 6-cylinder, rated at about 180 horsepower. The thing I liked about this when I researched this, it has the ZF4 and a ZF5 transmission. Those are the two options, and I am a huge fan, many of our listeners will know, to the ZF product. But styling, definitely timeless, had a graceful, absolutely, got a picture of it in studio here, had a graceful kind of an aesthetic to it, but definitely spirited in terms of performance. Ken, talk about the car.
Well, they brought the car out. Actually, it was first introduced in 1963, and they came out with a 64 model. And you're right, they built them up through 71. Started out as a 230. And the 230, when you think about a 230 SL, a 250 SL, or a 280 SL, you think about 2.3, 2.5, or 2.8 liters. That's basically what it stands for. And a 230 came out with a 4-speed transmission. And then they later came out with a 5-speed as an option in 66. And then they also had the 4-speed automatic, which was a non-torque converter automatic, and you probably can tell us more about that.
ZF4 HP22, very nice.
And matter of fact, the 5-speed stick was also a ZF. The car was originally replaced the 300 SL and the 190 SL. That's what they brought that out for, to replace those two cars. And just a real side story. When they first brought that car out, I saw one in a showroom, and at the time I thought, that's a beautiful car. I want to own one of those cars. And I thought, I told you about the time I bought the BMW. I paid too much money at $2,800.
Right, yeah.
Well, I said, I'll go $3,500 on one of those cars. I'd spend that much money. I walked to the dealership and I said, how much is it? $8,600.
Yeah.
And that was back then in the mid-'60s.
Oh, serious.
So anyway, they were ahead in a lot of ways. They had basically the safety, the unitized structure, the safety structure with crumple zones. They even went so far as not having any sharp edges in the interior that you would bang up against. Some of the engines that they had, they used only one engine, and that was a single overhead cam engine. And the engine, finally, in the 280 version, I think it was like 170 horsepower. Was a horsepower on it. And it was a good performer, but it wasn't a sterling performer. The subsequent ones, when they brought out the 450 V8 and the 380 V8s, that's when they really started to perform. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this car is that they had the regular AA arm front suspension, but the back had what they call a low pivot point. And if you can, swing axle, and if you can kind of imagine, just take a stock fixed axle, and then on one side of it, you put a swing axle, but not on the other side. And the other side is allowed to swing, though. And then across the top of the third member back there is a compensating spring they talk about. And plus it had the regular coil springs. It was really an unusual setup, I thought. And I have a lot of respect for Mercedes-Benz engineering. But that, to me, just doesn't look like a well-engineered piece. But they use that in the sedans, and some of the sedans too. And maybe some of our listeners can give us a little more information why that's a good design. It's just a swing axle that's made differently than...
Yeah, it's kind of an odd dog. Fireball Tim, you are our guest in studio. What do you think of this car? Talk about what it looked like. You're a car designer, so aesthetically, what do you think of it?
You know, it's interesting about this car because I grew up. My dad bought the 350 SL when that first came out, and I was always curious about what the precursors are, and I've always loved this car, and I like the styling cues of the European model and being able to compare them. But the interesting thing to me about the car really becomes something different every time you see it in a different color. And that was something that Mercedes did a lot of, was making the wheels the same color, the wheel cap same color as the car, and it gave it a very elegant, cohesive kind of feel. But with the top off, it was just an extraordinary car that you could envision driving along the coast of Positano or something truly beautiful, because it was the car that represented that. This was not something you were going to drive to the store and buy groceries, although maybe.
And now it is a beautiful car, but it wasn't maybe the best time in our country, was it, Spence?
No, it wasn't. But I will say this: along with the Benz, it was Bullitt, Big Mac, and the Beatles. The Beatles had the #1 song with "Hey Jude." The Big Mac came out, 49 cents, and we had the movie Bullitt, which is the greatest car chase ever.
Well, Mercedes built about 6,930 of these, around about that neighborhood. Ken, you've already tipped the hat. The car original MSRP was between $7,000 and $8,000, $8,600. What is a good number 2 car worth today?
280 is going to probably run around 130 grand.
Really?
But I'll tell you something. They just sold one over in Chantilly. Bonhams did last month for 159,000.
Oh.
So that could be slightly an outlier, but that's where you're looking at. You're looking at those kinds of numbers for that car now.
Well, there's one in Malibu, California, that's made into a planter right now. There's actually weeds and stuff growing.
Yeah, there's actually several in Malibu. But if you want to see some really good examples, this weekend is the Vintage Car Show in Malibu, in the North Trancas area, and there's generally a few of them that show up.
Well, before going any further, I want to say whether you're looking for simple replacement parts, restoration parts, you need some performance upgrades, whatever you're looking for, NPD, National Parts Depot, these are the go-to guys. Check their catalogs for part availability. National Parts Depot makes our classics possible. No one knows classics better than NPD. All right, let's get right now back into it. I want to talk about that 68 Porsche 911 Targa. Curiously, not one of my more favorite body styles. I don't hate it, but I'm not in love with it either. It was initially offered as a coupe. The Targa became available, I think, Ken, you can correct me on this, it was 1967. I think I'm correct on that. And it was either a glass or a soft folding top window, but the 2.0 liter flat 6 engine rated at about, I think it was around 140 or so horsepower back then, and then the fully synchronized manual trans. The car just in '68, it's just not one of my favorite Porsches.
Yeah, but you like the 911, don't you?
I do like the 911.
Everybody likes the 911, and if I have to take a Targa, I'll take a Targa.
Yeah.
But now this car again was introduced about the same time, but basically the 911 was carried right through to 1989. But you're right; it was originally that little overhead cam flat 6 was 148 horsepower, and then they came along in 1967 and they came out with the S model, which is 180 horsepower. Now significantly more horsepower. But by 1968, now that's the year we're talking about now, they stopped importing it because it couldn't meet emissions. So then they had the what they called the 911L, which was the basic 148, and they brought out a 911T that was a cheaper entry level 4-speed. And they had the 5-speed too, and at the time their 5-speed was a dog leg in the first gear. And the reason why they used that pattern for so many years was because the race cars, the only time they used first gear was to get off the paddock. And then after that, they never got into it again. So it was basically a straight H pattern after that. But, there's something about the 911s that I think that, they probably have one of the richest racing histories, one of the most successful racing histories of any car made anywhere, anytime. And even today, you look at, which basically we've talked about before, I think is inherently a bad design, having the engine over behind the rear
like
axle.
a pendulum
and they still
type
make
thing,
the best, some of the best handling cars in the world. So I particularly like the Targa.
I wanted to ask Mr. Spence one question. Spence, what did you think of this car?
I think it's very nice. And coincidence or not, 911, 911, it was when the emergency number was first used in 1968, and you were making $8,000 a year to buy one of these babies. That was average income.
Holy cow. Well, the original MSRP on the car, Ken, was just under $8,000, so about the same as the Mercedes.
Salary. Yes.
Yeah.
But what is that car worth today?
Well, right now, 911 is the most volatile market in the world.
Okay.
Right this minute, It's about $150,000.
Okay.
By the time the show's over, it could change dramatically. As a matter of fact, a number one, 267.
Just let me know if it goes down.
Yeah.
A number one, 267 car just recently sold for something like $280,000.
Holy mackerel.
So, I mean, the 911's all over the market right now. I would be really leery.
Start with you, Mr. Spence. Of these cars, which one do you like
Oh,
better?
Lord, won't you buy me? I'm going with a Mercedes-Benz all the way, no doubt. It's done.
Yeah, and just based on aesthetics, I think I
It's a
understand.
beauty.
Mr. Ken, where are you heading?
The Pagoda top Mercedes-Benz.
Okay, so we have two Mercedes. Now I want to bring in Mr. Fireball Tim. He's our guest today. Tim, which one do you like?
I don't know. The Porsche has always been spirited as kind of, it just couldn't get it out the first few times, but I'm going to have to go with the Mercedes.
Ooh, so we have a bit of a dilemma here in studio. We have a four-way tie with the Mercedes because I don't care a bunch for the look of that Porsche. So here's what we need you to do. Here's what we want you to happen here. Go over to our Facebook page or to our website. Let us know which car that you like best between the Mercedes and the Porsche. We'd love to hear from you. But again, if you've got a classic ride, you're in the middle of a classic build, maybe you're just considering getting into classic car restoration, here's what we got to get you to do. We got to get you over to npdlink.com. That's right. It's National Parts Depot's website. There you're going to find just about any conceivable restoration part that you're going to need for your ride. Check them out anytime, 24 hours a day at npdlink.com. But folks, we got a bunch more coming up. We're going to check in with the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association, and I want to continue our conversation with Mr. Fireball Tim. One of the things that I am just really interested in that is learning when it comes to designing a car for a movie. What in the heck does that mean ultimately? Are we talking about, how it looks, how it videos on a camera, how it rolls, how it doesn't roll? Is you going to tow it? You're going to drive it? Those types of things. And I think many of our listeners would have exactly the same question. So you don't want to miss that. But stay in your seats. We'll be right back with one of America's largest coverage networks. We are your ultimate stop in automotive radio. We are Horsepower for an hour.